Chapter 14. Disenchantment. In the disenchanting chamber, Syra Ciara lay in her cocoon, suspended from the ceiling by the wispy strands of forest bands. She looked just as she had done when Septimus had said goodbye to her before he left to be with Marcellus. Her face was bone-thin, her hair pulled back into two tight little plaits, and her skin was tinged blue by the light in the chamber. Nothing had changed except for one important thing. Syra had her eyes open. Syra looked up at the three faces staring down at her. Her gaze traveled blankly from Marcia to Dandra Draw and on to Septimus. "Syra," said Septimus, "it's me, Septimus. Syra, you're safe. You're in the wizard tower." Syra frowned and struggled to speak. "Is enough now," Dandra said. "I watch Syra tonight, and if all go well, we move her. Is good. Out, please." In her own domain, Dandra Dray had confidence. She shooed Marcia and Septimus out like a couple of annoying blue bottles. They emerged into the sick bay, smiling. "Wonderful," said Marcia. "Dandra has done all I hoped she would. I'll see you tomorrow evening, Septimus. 6 o'clock sharp, please, in time for Dandra and Hildegard's wizard-warming supper." She strode across the sick bay, giving a cheery wave to Rose, the sick bay apprentice, and was gone. Septimus sighed. He wished he did not have to go back to Marcellus. He so much wanted to be there when Syra came out of the disenchanting chamber. Loath to leave, Septimus stopped to say hello to Rose. Rose, tall and skinny with brown hair so long that she could sit on it, looked very efficient. Her hair was tied back into the regulation sick bay plait, and she wore a white tabard over her green apprentice robes. "Still here?" Septimus asked. He knew that Rose, who was on the new apprentice rotation scheme, had been hoping to go on to the charm desk. "Still here," agreed Rose. She glanced around. "Worse luck," she whispered. "I'm sorry," Septimus stopped. "That didn't sound right. I didn't mean I'm sorry to see you. I meant—" Rose smiled. "That's okay. I know what you meant. I say stupid stuff like that all the time. Oh, see, I did it right then." "Quits, then," Septimus said, grinning. "Anyway, maybe it's not so bad still being here. Maybe you'll end up upstairs." "Upstairs?" "Yes, with Marcia. She's put the pyramid library onto the scheme." "Wow!" Rose looked amazed. The charm desk paled into insignificance compared with the pyramid library. "Oh, gosh! I must go and get some sheets," she said. "We've got a scribe coming up. Broken leg." Rose rushed off and headed for the cupboard between beds 12 and 1. The beds in the sick bay were ranged around the room like numbers on a clock face. There were only 2 occupants, both elderly wizards and both asleep. Septimus watched a large pile of sheets stagger over to bed 3. "Need any help?" he offered the stack of sheets. "Oh, yes, please," it said. Septimus helped Rose make the bed in the approved young army fashion. Rose surveyed the result. "You're good," she said, surprised. Septimus very nearly gave Rose a young army salute, but stopped just in time. "Thank you," he said. "I'd better go. I'll be back tomorrow evening." Rose smiled. "Syra will be out then?" "Yes. Isn't that great?" "Yes. Miss Straw has been amazing." Rose watched Septimus breeze out, and tried not to wish that he was coming back to see her rather than Syra. Down in the great hall, Septimus bumped into Beetle. "Hey, Beat," he smiled. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Sep. Just seen poor old Barnaby Yu onto the stretcher lift. Broke his leg. He fell into one of those puddles. There's a really deep one in a dark corner of Little Creep Cut. Be careful if you go down there. People cover them up, then some joker gets an idea it would be fun to move the covers." Septimus fell in with Beetle as he walked across to the doors. "Marcia was going on about puddles too," he said. "She thinks it has something to do with Marcellus." "It has," said Beetle. "I am convinced of it. He's doing something he's not telling us about." "Really?" The double doors swung open and a rush of fresh, cold air met them. Twilight was falling as Beetle and Septimus headed down the wide steps, and the great doors closed silently behind them. They walked across the Wizard Tower courtyard, their boots crackling through the frosted snow, the ice crystals sparkling in the light from the rushlights that lined the wall. "I suppose you haven't noticed Marcellus doing anything unusual?" asked Beetle. "Like disappearing and not saying where he's been?" Septimus did not reply. "Sorry," said Beetle. "I know I shouldn't ask. Confidentiality between master and apprentice and all that." "It's okay. I'm not his apprentice, and I'm not going to be either. I was thinking about what you said. Well, Marcellus comes and goes, you know. Nothing unusual, really. He's just busy, I guess." Beetle sensed a but. He was right. "But, well, Yesterday Marcella sent me off to Aunt Zelda's to get a flask. He didn't tell me it was so huge that I'd have to bring it back across the marshes. He must have known it would take days, and he didn't seem pleased that I was back so soon. It made no sense, until I thought that maybe he didn't want me around for some reason, you know? Well, well, fancy that, said Beetle. At the great arch, both Beetle and Septimus stopped and turned around to look up at the wizard tower. It was one of those crystal-clear nights, when the lights of the tower were dazzling. They had glittered and sparkled in the frosty air, brilliant against the tower's silver sheen, turning the gently falling snowflakes a soft purple and blue. Wow, breathed Beetle. Sometimes I forget how beautiful this place is. Yeah, said Septimus. After a month underground, he too had forgotten. He felt a pang of homesickness for the wizard tower, and had a real desire to turn around and go back. Home. He sighed. He had one more day with Marcellus. That was all. It would soon be over. Septimus and Beetle walked through the inky shadows of the great arch, and emerged into Wizard Way. They looked down the snowy way, quietly busy with people closing up their shops for the night, and at the far end they saw the unmistakable red flash of Jenna's cloak, as she disappeared through the palace gate. Septimus was in a reflective mood. "You never did say anything to Jenna, did you?" he said. Beetle looked at his friend, surprised. "About what?" "Beetle, you know what." "About liking her?" Beetle shot Septimus a look as if to say, "How did you know?" "Well, no," he said. "She didn't want me to. I could tell." "Could you? How?" Septimus really wanted to know. "I just could. And then, well, I suddenly knew for sure that she didn't care. Not in that way. But it's fine now. I've got better things to do." "So that's okay, then?" Septimus sounded doubtful. Beetle smiled. He realized what he had said really was true. "Actually, Sep, it is okay. What I love is being chief scribe. Most days I wake up and I still can't believe that's what I am. Most days I don't even think about Jenna." "Really?" "Well, maybe that's not totally true, but it's okay. And anyways, she's very young." "She's not that young. She's nearly 14.5 now." "Yeah, well, even so. Same age as me," Septimus grinned. "You're 6 months older, remember? After your time with Marcellus?" Oh, yeah. That was not something Septimus liked to remember much, being stranded in another time. The more he thought about it, the less he wanted to go back to Marcellus's house in Snake Slipway, which, especially at night, reminded him of that time. He took a deep breath of the Wizard Way air from his time, and wandered along with Beetle toward the manuscriptorium. At the door, Beetle said with a grin, "Want to come in and have a fizz fruit? I've got buckets of 'em upstairs now." Septimus shook his head. "I should really be getting back to Marcellus. I have to tell him that Marcia won't let me do another month with him." "Oh, come on, Sep. Just one little fizz fruit. You haven't seen my new place yet." Septimus needed no excuse to change his mind. "Okay, Beetle, just one." The new chief hermetic scribe took the extraordinary apprentice through the manuscriptorium with a proudly proprietorial air. The large room with the tall desks was empty. Unlike the previous chief hermetic scribe, Beetle did not believe in keeping scribes at work after dark had fallen. It was brightly lit with fresh candles placed in the ancient candle holders set into the wall, and the room no longer had the air of suppressed boredom and gloom that had pervaded it in Jilly Jin's time. Beetle and Septimus headed toward the short flight of steps that led up to a battered blue door. The rooms of a chief hermetic scribe were modest in comparison with the rooms of an extraordinary wizard, but Beetle loved them. There was one long, low-ceilinged room with a multitude of beams that spread almost the entire length of the manuscriptorium. The room had a line of 3 low dormer windows on either side. One side looked out across the rooftops to the moat and the dark forest beyond, and the other looked out on Wizard Way. Off the main room was a small beamed bedroom, a bathroom, and a tiny kitchen where Beetle kept his stash of fizz bomb cubes to make up the fizz fruit. "Wow," said Septimus, admiring the minute kitchen dominated by the large bucket of refurbished fizz bomb cubes on the shelf. "You can do just what you want, without Marcia banging on the door telling you not to." "Let's hope so," said Beetle with a grin. "Chocolate banana, apricot ginger, or a weird blue one. No idea what it is." "Weird blue one, please." "Thought you'd say that. Cheers, Sep." "Cheers, Beetle. Happy new home." It was much later when Septimus finally left the manuscriptorium and headed back to Marcellus's house in Snake Slipway. As he approached the tall, thin house, with its windows ablaze with lighted candles, Septimus felt very guilty for being so late. He looked up to the little attic window where his bedroom was, and saw the lighted candle in the window, which Marcellus always placed there at night. He thought of the welcoming fire in the grate, the sloping eaves, his desk, and his bookshelf full of physic books, and he felt a stab of sadness. He realized he had loved being there too. He thought about the great chamber of alchemy and physic, where the fire was ready to be lit, which he was going to miss. He sighed. There were 2 places in the castle where he belonged, but he had to choose one, and he had chosen. But it didn't mean he liked the other any less, and it didn't make it any easier to tell Marcellus. Septimus let himself into the house with a sinking feeling in his stomach. Marcellus was waiting. "You look frozen," he said, as he ushered Septimus into the small front room. "Your lips are quite blue." He made Septimus sit beside the fire and drink some of his special hot ginger. While Marcellus was putting another log on the fire, Septimus took the opportunity to rub the fizz-fruit blue off his lips. "That's better," said Marcellus, settling into his old armchair opposite Septimus. "You've got some color back now." Septimus took a deep breath. "I have to leave tomorrow," he said. "Ah," said Marcellus. "I'm sorry," said Septimus. Marcellus gave a rueful smile. "I am not surprised, apprentice. I had a little, contretemps with Marcia recently, and to tell the truth, I was not expecting anything else." He raised his glass to his old apprentice. "Here's to you, Septimus, and my thanks to you for all your work. I know this last month has not been quite what you had hoped for, but I have so enjoyed having you to help me." Marcellus paused. "I did hope you might decide to, what is the phrase, jump ship, become my permanent apprentice." "I did think about it," said Septimus. "A lot." "But you decided not?" "Yes." Marcellus nodded. "I understand. One has to make choices. You will be difficult to replace, apprentice. However, I do have someone in mind." Septimus looked surprised. It had not occurred to him that Marcellus would replace him with someone else. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. Late that evening, when Septimus had gone up to his room to pack his bag, the new residents of the house opposite Marcellus Pye got an unexpected visit from their neighbor. Lucy Gringe, resplendent in a bare-boned dressing gown she had just finished making, opened the door. "Oh," she said, and then, remembering her manners, "Hello, Mr. Pye. Do come in." "Thank you." Marcellus stepped inside. "Goodness," he said. It was chaos. "Excuse the mess. Wedding presents," said Lucy cheerfully. "It's nice to see you. Would you like some herb tea? Come through." "Oh, well, actually, I wondered if Simon was—" But Lucy had already set off. Marcellus followed her along the dark, narrow corridor, watching his long, pointy shoes on various objects strewn across the bare floorboards. "Ouch! Sorry, Mr. Pye. You okay?" "Oof, yes. Thank you, Lucy." They negotiated the obstacle course and reached the tiny kitchen, which consisted of a fire with a large pot hanging over it, and a deep stone sink set on tree-trunk legs, in which sat the remains of supper. The kitchen was a jumble, covered with pots and pans that had nowhere to hang, half-open boxes and stacks of plates. Lucy saw Marcellus's gaze travel around the room. "We'll get it sorted," she said cheerfully. "I'll call Cy. He'll be really glad to see you." "Ah," said Marcellus, still lost for words. Lucy opened the back door and yelled into a tiny yard enclosed by a high brick wall. "Cy! Cy! Mr. Pye!" Simon, who had been trying to unblock a drain, emerged from the shadows, wiping his hands on his tunic. "Cy, Marcellus is here to see you," said Lucy. Simon smiled. "Good evening, Marcellus. Good to see you. Would you like some tea?" Marcellus, a fastidious man, had decided it might be safer not to risk the tea. "Your good lady wife," Lucy, still not used to being called Simon's wife, giggled, "kindly offered me some, but I mustn't stay long. I have a proposition to put to you, Simon." Lucy and Simon looked at each other. Simon cleared a pile of plates off a rickety chair. "Please, do sit down, Marcellus." Marcellus saw the sticky ring left on the chair and shook his head. No, I really must get back. This won't take but a moment." 5 minutes later, Simon and Lucy watched Marcellus Pye cross the snowy slipway back to his house, the moonlight glinting off the gold fastenings on the back of his shoes. Simon was lost for words. In his hand was a precious copy of the alchemist's oeuvre, the I Marcellus, with instructions to read it thoroughly and meet Marcellus at 6 o'clock the following evening. "Well," said Lucy, "who'd have thought it?